Chapter 15, The Christians. Begin all acts and thinking by using Al-Kalum the All. Tablet 3, The Journey of the Wisemen. 19 times 6 equals 114. Lo, our personal record keepers came to log the birth of this Elohim into flesh, for we would watch the skies for many years to this date, when the great Tammuz would return in flesh for the salvation of all flesh. Our loggers, namely Balthasar who headed 4, and Melchior who headed 4, and Jasper who headed 4, all followed the craft that delivered this spark into this world. They called them simply Magas. The Magi were a group of mystics known by many different names. They lived in communities set up all around the world. These Magi or Wisemen were linked together as one through the order of the Essenes. The Essenes were very strict, observing daily prayers, foretelling the future and being well learnt in the scriptures, logging the motion and movement of the stars. The Essenes followed the Levitical purity laws strictly and avoided contamination by the outside world. They saw the Jerusalem of their day, governed by the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin, and the false Kohen priests as the children of wickedness. Thus, they removed themselves to the mountains of Jordan to form the new Jerusalem, Mount Zion. They received their laws from Leviticus, one of the scrolls received by Moses. They kept themselves isolated and lived for, of, and by each other. No one had individual property, and they all shared in the ownership rights. If one member visited another community, he or she was treated with the utmost concern. Their livelihood was sowing and planting. Some were herdsmen, beekeepers, writers and healers. Some worked as handicraft writers and healers, using roots and herbs. They raised the locust plant, which was a part of their diet. This is the same locust which Johanna the Baptist ate in the wilderness with wild honey. The Essenes were ascetic and advocated a vegetarian diet. Some of the Essenes were astrologers. Their system of astrology has passed on from the ancient mystic order of Melchizedek, of which they were a branch. They were to log the birth of an individual. This was called solar biology, for you would not only be what sign you were born under, but because your father was one sign and your mother another sign, the 33 and a third chromosome that came through your father put his sign into you, and the 33 and a third chromosome that came from your mother put her sign into you, and then 33 and a third that makes up the sign that you were born under means that each person is born with 3 signs equally manifesting in their character. The Essenes believed in selective birth for selected characters, so the Essenes were holders of great mysteries within their order, and much symbolism was used within their community. Balthasar, meaning save the life of the ruler, was a Cushite from the tribe of Noah. This tribe was situated in Ethiopia. Balthasar travelled with 4 of his students from Ethiopia. The next group was headed by Jasper, meaning treasure. Jasper was from Persia. He was of a mixed seed. He brought 4 of his students as well. The third of the leaders of the Wisemen was Melchior, meaning ruler of light. Melchior was from the city of Midian. He was a student that sat under Melchizedek, of which Yeshua was a part of as well, all belonging to the ancient mystical order of Melchizedek, who was after the order of Eli and Elianel the Most High. This Melchior was also accompanied by 4 of his students. When the Wisemen were preparing for the birth of Yeshua, they brought along gifts for him, which accorded the stature of his station. Balthasar brought gold, Jasper brought frankincense, and Melchior brought myrrh. And she gave birth to him, upon sighting the heavenly sign of Hut, the astrological house of Hebrews. Balthasar, his students and some travellers, as well as Jasper with his students, made their way to the city of Midian. They were made aware that once they reached this city Midian, another sign would be given to them to guide them to Yeshua. Now the journey from Ethiopia to Midian was 600 miles, and the journey from Persia to Midian was 650 miles, a journey indeed. They picked up a number of stragglers along the way, a number of soldiers, warriors and visitors who were eager to meet the Anointed One, so they accompanied the caravan to Midian. The majority of people in the caravan travelled by camel because most of the journey took place across the desert. Let me teach you a little about camels. Camels are large, strong desert animals. They are able to travel great distances across the arid deserts with small amounts of food and water. Camels carry their own food supply on their back in the form of a hump of fat. This hump provides energy for the camel if food becomes scarce. There are two chief kinds of camels, the Arabian camel and the Bactrian camel, which has two humps. A special kind of Arabian camel called a dromedary is raised for riding and racing. The dromedary is a swift, slightly built camel used for traveling in parts of India, Arabia and Africa. It sometimes grows up to 7 foot, 2 meters tall. The dromedary only has one hump. It can live on small amounts of food and water and requires only short periods of rest. The dromedary has a swinging trot and travels at a rate of about 9 miles, 1,000 kilometers in a day. The camel has always been of great importance to the desert traveler because of its ability to walk on the sand without sinking and can carry heavy loads as much as 1,000 pounds or 450 kilograms. Camels stand from 6 to 7 foot tall and can weigh from 1,000 to 1,600 pounds. Upon the caravan's arrival in Midian, they met Melchior, who was watching the skies for the next sign. He was rewarded one shadow hour when, after the third planetary conjunction, all the heavenly hosts met together in one single point, creating what appeared to be a bright star. This was the sign that Yeshua had been born. This star signaled the birth of an Ilamutajasid. This was the star that appeared on Tuesday, June the 26th, in the year 1945 AD at my birth. It also looked this way. It was at this sighting that the Wisemen knew to make their way to Jerusalem, which was approximately 525 miles away. Before I give you the details concerning the birth of Yeshua or Messiah, I must provide you with a little background on the events which surrounded this point in time. Herod the Great was the familiar name of a dynasty of princes who ruled from 55 BC to 93 AD, beginning with the patriarch Herod Antipa. This lineage of Idumeans, classified as Edomites, were forced to accept Judaism, and they ruled principally in Judea. They were not readily accepted by the Judahites, and there were many uprisings against them. Herod the Great was given total rulership of Palestine, which included Jerusalem, given to him by Julius Caesar, sole ruler of the Roman Empire. Herod was an ambitious, paranoid power seeker who would stop at nothing to attain status and authority. He was informed of his future glory during his childhood by an Essenic seer or wise man named Manhem. At the time, he found it hard to believe he would be ruling such a vast empire since he was the second son of Antipa. Manhem also slapped Herod on the back and told him from that moment on his future would change and that his life would be one of much happiness, but his characteristics would cause him much misery. When political fortune did favor Herod the Great, and he finally did become ruler, Herod the Great remembered the Essene seer and extended every consideration towards the order and its members. At this time, the Judahites were forced to take loyalty oaths to the Romans in order for the freedom to exercise their own religious practices. The Essenes were excused from taking the loyalty oath due to the outcome of the accuracy of the Essenic seer, which was strengthened and manifested at a later date when he consulted so-called astrologers as to the birth of a child who would be ruler. Herod had 10 wives and 46 children. Herod held no qualms about murdering anyone who threatened his position. In fact, when Herod conquered Jerusalem, he had 46 noblemen murdered who supported their leaders. During his reign, he also had some of his relatives murdered because of rumors of treason and attempts against his life. His own children were included in a list of potential usurpers of his throne. So it was no great surprise that when Herod learned of the birth of this Messiah, he became obsessed with finding this threat to his throne. The way Herod learned of his birth was when a caravan reached the city during the time of taxation. Included in this caravan were wise men who proceeded to inquire as to the whereabouts of the child. The wise men were surprised that there were none to aid them because no one knew what ruler they were referring. The residents directed them to Herod, who was in the midst of directing a great census taken during this time. All the residents of the territory of Palestine were ordered to return to the land of their birth so that they could be easily counted at the time of taxation. This included Mary, the mother of Yeshua, and her husband Joseph and their children, James, also called Jacob, Simon, Jude, Joseph, who is Barnabas, Martha, Esther and Salome, Joseph's children by Halsa, who were on their way back to the town of Bethlehem. Tablet 4, the Starship. 19 times 1 equals 19. Lo, the wise men inquired of Herod as to the whereabouts of the boy ruler, at which point he contacted the Essenic seers to find out more. Herod was informed that the Messiah could be found in Bethlehem. It was at this point that Herod sent the wise men to find the Messiah and said, "Seek diligently for the youth, and when you have found him, come and show me that I too can show obedience to him." Herod offered homage by way of his mouth, though deceit was hidden in his heart. Herod was anxious to know the whereabouts of the child because he wanted to eliminate him and keep his station secure. This was why he pretended that he was interested in the child. The same star which had been their guide on the road appeared to them again. The wise man was exceedingly happy because the star moved on before them until they reached the cave. Remember, this was not a star at all. Rather, it was a gathering of all the heavenly host. It was a craft with Elohim, traveling as a pillar of light, shining against the black sky as a star. Stars are too large to move across the sky, and shooting stars are without point of direction, let alone a navigator. Yes, this was indeed a craft, for this child was from above.